All right, let's launch this sucker. Here we go with episode number 10. We are in to double digits. I never thought I would do a podcast ever in my life, and here we go. We're 10 episodes in, 10 being a pretty cool number. I can speak for myself, but probably most men out there, 10 is the age where we emotionally stop developing. So if you're a woman in the world and you don't understand why we do the things that we do, you might want to look at that as a potential reason. However, that's not why I think this number is so cool. 10 is the perfect score for an archery shot on a target, which is the best segue I could have into the guest I have for today. So, about a month ago, I got hooked up with a man named John Dudley. Now, if you're in the archery world, you probably have an idea of who John is. And if you're not in the archery world, well, in the next 90 minutes, you're going to figure it out. Let's just say that the guy knows what he's talking about. And what you ought to do is go to his Facebook page, John Dudley, Knock on Archery. Click the About button and just read for a little bit. The story, the biography, the awards that he's gotten in his archery career, it's ridiculous. And I've had some very good fortune in my life to be around just absolute masters of their craft. Everybody from, world-class divers to the best three-gun shooters on the face of the earth, world-class alpinists and climbers. And I've always been just infatuated with and mesmerized by mastery and not only the mastery itself, but what it takes to actually achieve that level. A lot of people like to talk about luck, and I don't know, maybe there are people who are luckier than others, but I would say from every apex individual that I've ever been around, luck is absolutely not the determining factor as to how they got to that position. The best pistol shot that I ever saw spent hours nearly every day and millions of rounds on the range to get to the position where he became the best pistol shot, probably in the United States, maybe even in the world. Who knows? Now, is there luck involved in there somewhere? Sure. But that guy is defined by his work ethic. He's defined by his dedication. He's defined by the amount of time that he has spent mastering what it is that he does. What I've always found by those individuals that have that much time and experience in one discipline is that it's their ability to coach. They can look at somebody and they can give you a cue that is relatively innocuous, that like something super small. And they can just say, hey, change this or change that. And in the individual that they're coaching, it has an immediate impact and an immediate difference. And, I had met Dudley one time when we were in Vegas, but let's just say I'd had a little bit of alcohol on board at the time. So I remember meeting him. I don't remember a damn thing that we talked about. So, sight unseen, the guy invites me to come out. Completely generous with his time, completely generous with his house, with his equipment. Go and get to spend a day and a half with a guy, and go on the internet and watch the guy shoot. Look him up on YouTube, or go to his YouTube channel, Knock on TV, and watch the level at which he shoots. It's ridiculous, and to get to see it live was unbelievable. But then to go there and have somebody to be able to coach you and just move small things in your body, microscopic manipulations, or explaining a concept, or explaining, even more importantly for me, the equipment and how the equipment works and how my body is interacting with the equipment. It was unbelievable. So definitely gave me the tools to take my archery game to the next level. I'm very, very new to the archery world. I just got a bow, I'd say, I don't know, maybe a year ago, maybe 18 months on the top end. And I absolutely love it because it's ridiculously hard and I suck at it. So I want to try to get better every day. And I try to start my day shooting in the morning, and I usually end my day shooting. And it's just that exercise and concentration and, trying to master something, trying to get myself on that, being a novice to at least going towards expert. Whether or not I ever get there, I don't really care, but I'm going to stay on that path trying to get there. Wow. So yeah, I just talked a ton. Bottom line, John Dudley is a complete archery badass. Got to sit down and talk with him for just over 90 minutes and ask him a bunch of questions selfishly because I'm getting ready to do my first hunting with a bow and arrow. If you're a hunter with a rifle, your odds of being successful are a little bit higher. And by that, I mean a lot higher than you are with the bow and arrow. The odds of actually harvesting an animal with a bow and arrow are very low. And I actually like that aspect of it as well. I actually don't even care if I get an animal. I just kind of want to go crawl around in the woods again and be sneaky and pretend that I'm a ninja. So here we go. Cleared Hot, episode number 10, The Perfect Score with John Dudley.
Okay, got the red smoke.
Gun run, north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
Oh, yeah, that bad boy's rolling. The numbers are red.
Yeah, because if you've podcasted more than twice, then you've done one halfway through and realized that Zoom is not rolling. It's just on. Have you done that yet?
No, but I did have a mic cable not in all the way. and as it was ongoing, it was when I was doing one by myself, fortunately, so I only wasted my own time. But like the earpiece was cutting out. I'm like, it's probably a headphone thing. I went to hit the playback button. It was I'm like, I'm a professional.
I've had several. A couple times it might have saved me though. I think one was a drunk hotel podcast with the Miller brothers, and
that's a dangerous game to play.
Yeah, we thought it was super funny, and then all of a sudden, about halfway through, I realized, oh dang it, it's not recording. So we tried our best to like relive the hysteria, but didn't happen.
It's not as funny on the second time through.
No, at that point it's acting, and I'm not good at that.
Yeah, I've tried my hand at it, and I'm not a thespian. This place is incredible, man. I can't thank you enough for the generosity of having me out and like giving me some of your time. Like, yeah, I owe you big time. Now you have to come to Montana.
Oh, I'm coming.
Yeah,
that's a no-brainer for me.
It's I kick myself that we took so long to move there from San Diego. San Diego is great. Don't get me wrong. If you complain about San Diego, you are an asshole. It's sunny 366 days out of the year. It's just beautiful. But yeah, talk about a different place. But so right around the corner, right? So I got my elk combined big game tag this year, elk and deer.
Oh yeah.
So I only have one question for you, and that's how do I kill an elk?
Well,
I can think about.
The hardest part, I think you've got nailed.
There was some luck involved today.
Like you could just go back to your roots and just put a lot of time on one tree or under one tree, and you would get one, especially the way that you're shooting right now. But there's definitely more time productive ways to do it.
Yeah.
You know, I've done it both. I mean, growing up as a whitetail hunter, you really learn patience. And I mean, I'm a hunter that I like being a recluse at times, and actually because my life's so hectic all the time, I just shut everything down come hunting season. I mean, I left the U.S. team because they had moved they moved the World Cup final into the end of September, and when they said, you know, okay, who's ever on the team, the World Cup finals in September, and I just said, listen, that is not a month that I work well with. So, yeah, I mean, once they started making that tournament then, and then they started making some of the first indoor tournaments in November, like I was out at that point because August 24th, Alberta starts, and I'm elk hunting in Alberta.
You're heading up there this year too, right?
Oh, shortly. Yeah. Yep. And then I just pretty much follow the Western tags. You know, I go from west kind of to east throughout September, and then October 1st, I'm back here in the Midwest hunting whitetails. And I feel like my success with whitetails is just because I love being in the woods, and to me, it doesn't bother me to sit dark to dark, you know, and I like it. I get a lot done. I feel like I feel like I learn a lot about myself too, and I also clear my mind, and I probably do my best writing. Like most of my best articles and stuff come from when I have time to really think about things. And then I also spend a lot of time now being able to go through my phone, and I can diagnose a lot of things that I've, pictures of myself that I've taken through the year, or I'll look at students, or I'll start looking at slow motion stuff of shots. I took a lot of pictures of you today.
Yep.
And I'll go back and I'll start looking at things and be able to, kind of critique those like microscopically. And I don't know, I feel like as a hunter, if you put in the time and if you're not overly aggressive and you're patient, like everything from a hunting point of view responds to pressure. Like pressure is the name of the game. If you're able to be in the element, which I assume there were times where if you could be in and be out with no one ever knowing you were there, it possibly meant that if that mission didn't work, you could at least go back in again without being, the red flags are flying, right?
You actually think about that quite often in the planning, because you can't, you can't, it even goes down to the level of, do we want to fly helicopters over this particular village because we're looking at going at it in a month?
Yep.
And we don't want to, we don't want to tip our hand at all, and you don't want to saturate an area. It's I actually never thought about it like that. Yeah, pressure, I've seen it even with humans, right?
Damn right.
It changes their behavior. And the pressure we put on and were successful in Iraq and Afghanistan, I think, is what drove the creation of ISIS, and then going from a place where they used to collaborate and get together, and now they're in countries all over the world because of that pressure.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. They've spread out. Animals do the same. If you go into areas where they haven't ever had that impact, then certainly their response time is slower. But if, especially if you're going to be hunting some public land in Montana,
it is for sure.
Yeah. So they're probably going to be a little bit more call shy, especially as the season progresses, even though they will call.
Fortunately, I don't know how to do the calls, so I don't have to worry about that.
Well, and I think that could play. I think that could play to your advantage, because, like I told you, for me, if a bull is very talkative and he's aggressive, then I'll talk. But otherwise, if they talk once, and you can get yourself in a position where when the sun comes up, or if you know where they're coming from in the evening, if you can hear them talk one time, then at that point, I don't like to give away my location. You're way better off trying to close that gap, get literally within the hot zone, and then, be patient, see how things develop, and then if time's starting to become a crunch, then call, and hopefully you're in close enough to where you're gonna get a response, not necessarily just a call back. Because a lot of times when you slip into a bedroom like that, and all of a sudden that bull realizes something's there, then they react a lot more than when you're in this buffer zone. Like if you're outside of an area where they don't feel threatened, so to speak, if you're bugling at him, then he'll just bugle back, and then he's probably going to round up his ladies and then take them away, because he doesn't want a satellite bull or a bigger bull, worse yet, to come into his herd. So he's gonna talk to you just enough to where he knows he's keeping his distance. So if you can hear that one and get as close as you can,
without tipping your hand.
And like I told you, I think with your background, your success is going to come from just identifying the target, like where is it, and then use a lot of what your natural training was.
Fieldcraft, yep.
Yeah, because when you and I talked about how I stalk or how I approach, or I think my wife Sharon was telling you a story about
how you move.
Yeah, her and Harry were following me, and they were like, it seemed very sporadic, but in my mind, it's a big chess board. When I'm looking forward, I'm trying to look at every single detail between me and what I need to get to 100 yards away. And so I'm plotting all that in my mind. Not necessarily, straight line rarely is the best line unless you're just trying to cover speed.
It only works in a car.
Yeah, if you've got if you have that dead space or you've got a blocker, then you can roll. But if you don't, then I'm looking at, okay, that tree shed its leaves. there's leaves blowing across there. They're dry, so I've got to swing wide to that, and then all of a sudden I'm looking for short grass, and maybe I'm in the short grass and it's good, and then all of a sudden I see where there's a bunch of old bean stubble, and I know that that's going to crunch on my boot, and so I'm laying all this stuff out in my mind to where I'm just trying to get in as quick as I can and quiet. And then I think for me, always being in a shooting posture too. Mm-hmm. A lot of times you'll be in your process of trying to slip, and then all of a sudden an opportunity just comes out of nowhere. And when guys don't have an arrow loaded, or their bow's upside down, or their bow's down.
I see it on their backs sometimes too, on their backpacks.
Yeah, there's probably times where you have to cover a lot of ground, or you're having to climb. If it's real mountainous, there may be times where you do that. Especially if you're crawling, you might need to lay it on your back. Like if you're having to be
like a legit low crawl.
Yeah, legit on your belly, just trying to slip as quiet as you can. You may have to lay it on your back, but for the most part, if I'm within my bow's pins, my bow is upright, knocked, ready to rock.
We might as well carry a rock if it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
So people ask me a lot of questions about guns, and I always ask them, do you carry a round in the chamber? And if they say no, then in my opinion, you should just go to Home Depot and get a framing hammer and carry that, because they have the same effective range.
Yeah.
An unloaded gun and a framing hammer can do about the same damage when they're not loaded.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's amazing when pressure's on, it's amazing to me. I've been around so many people in the timber that they can't load an arrow. If they miss and then they
mean the pressure,
yeah,
the internal pressure?
Yeah,
they're
if
putting on
also,
themselves.
yeah, as soon as you have internal pressure, like say you're in a situation where someone, where you needed to pull out a gun for self-defense, most of the people, well, I would say 95% of the people that I saw in my conceal and carry class, I would be willing to bet they couldn't even jack a hammer back if someone came up behind them and grabbed them and said, "You're gonna die." I mean, they'd be like, "Ah!" And I've seen people with bows do that. They can't even get the releases upside down, and I've seen all kinds of stuff, but that's when you have to slow everything down and just.
In the moments that count, you better move with purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very methodical. You almost have to turn to how cornstarch. If you start to try to move it too fast, it hardens. Have you ever seen that? Cornstarch.
Nope, you're well outside of my wheelhouse right now.
you can if you have a putty, cornstarch is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
You can turn a spoon in there really slow and it's pliable. But if you try to move the spoon fast, it locks.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So I think in those moments, and I learned this as a competitive shooter, and part of the reason why I'm successful as a bow hunter is because I competed. Mm-hmm. And I competed for the reason of I wanted to be the best bow hunter that I could. Ethically, I want to have the best shot. But then once you're in those elements, every tournament, when you're in a final, it's no different than having a bull coming in. And you're sitting there watching this bull come. You can hear him, and your heart just starts pounding to the point where you can hear it. You think someone else could hear it. Your throat's lumping up. And it's those are the moments where if you put yourself in those positions enough times, and for me, the competition was my practice for hunting. Yep. It just gets to the point where it's okay, basics. Breathe, slow this freaking heart rate down. Just everything else will take care of itself, but I've got to go back to the most important stuff is oxygen, slowing this freaking heart rate down, and starting to think normal. So whenever I'm in those positions, it's almost like I want to go slower.
We had a saying in the teams, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And you'd see it because we do a lot of speed drills, pistol drills, rifle drills. Shoot your primary, transition to your secondary with standards, or start with your back to the target. A classic one is the El Prez drill, where you start with your back to the target, 3 silhouette targets behind you, turn, draw, 2 rounds in each target, reload, 2 rounds in each target. And the people who are amped up, they get through, most of the time they miss to start with, and in the turn, they start fumbling for their holster instead of going, moving the way they should with a purpose and sacrificing some speed, getting it on the first draw.
Yep.
And the guy who goes and gets it clean, he's out, even though he's moving slower, engaging the targets, hitting them accurately, and then the mag change. I've seen some of the fastest El Pres runs destroyed because they pull a mag out and it goes flying, or they pull it out and they're rattling it around because they just need to take a moment to look down at the magazine port of the gun and put it in, but instead they're like, and they went from like a 6-second El Pres time to they're throwing their gun across the range and like kicking dirt because they're a crybaby.
Oh yeah.
Because there's a lot of those in the SEAL teams. I'm not gonna lie. The best school that I ever went to, or the school that I think I got the most out of, like I was telling you and your wife about, was sniper school, where we learned the hard way, the principles of I forget what you called it yesterday, blind space. We called it dead space.
Yeah.
And for people who have no idea what we're talking about, it's, putting an object in between something that you don't want to see you, and then you can literally walk to that object unseen.
Yep.
Because the sniper school stalks, and again, you learn to move smooth too, and you learn to think before you move. Because the first stalk, they have your back turned, and there's a table out there somewhere. I think it was 1,000 to 1,500 yards out, and you have to get. I think it was within 180 to 200 yards, fire your round, they move a walker in. And so the first stalk, everybody turns around and they just start moving. And they have no idea where the people are with the binos.
Yeah.
And so people are just like moving because they want to move. They don't think through it. And it's like, and they'll say freeze. And everybody has to freeze. And a guy walks over and touches you. If they can touch you, you're done. And 2 minutes into it, a guy's done because instead of thinking through it, they're off. And the best lesson I ever had reinforced to me on dead space is I had been low crawling, I'm going to say for 2 hours. 2 hours. Legit high desert in Nyland, California is where we did our stalking. I'm in a ghillie suit that was covered in entirely too much stuff because I got all excited when I got it and didn't realize it glowed when the sun hit it. So at night I'm now taking off the canvas and stuff that was in there.
Good old shiny burlap.
It was burlap, yeah.
Yeah,
and so
glue.
I'm just crawling, right? And I'm dragging my weapon with my foot. It's in the drag bag. So I think the sorest I've ever been in my abs is from crawling and dragging the bag up.
Yeah.
And 2 hours into this, literally half the distance from you and I, a buddy of mine just walks by me. He's like, "Hey, how's it going?" I'm looking up at him. I'm just like, I'm going to kill you at some point. Why? Because 3 feet to my left was dead space. And he literally just was like, and he was watching. He sat back and watched me for an hour.
Yep.
And I couldn't even lift my head up to see where the table was. So I'm needless to say, I didn't get a great score on that stock. But I was like, okay. And then it would be, they'd say go, and some people would take off running, and I would just turn around and I'd sit down, whip out the binos, look everywhere near and far. That's another one that trips people up, looking both near and far. They can only look, right in front of them, and there's great dead space out for 200 yards, but then nothing. And then they can either low crawl or reverse their steps, go another direction and go into it. And you got to have some patience and tolerance to do that. But I'd sit there and I wouldn't move until I could figure out where the bench was that the 2 instructors were sitting at with binos. And then it's like, okay, and we weren't allowed to use laser rangefinders. We were mill dotting stuff, so they had to have like a set of binos on the table or a radio because you can just do the math, and we were milling it. I'm like, okay, I need to get there, and I would plan my whole route out, and then I would move.
Yep.
And that served me so well. And those lessons, that's why that school was so applicable. Then it was talking about camouflage, and you need to match what's behind you, not necessarily what's in front of you. Otherwise, you're going to stick out. And the best moves were, 2 different colored bushes, and you'd grab camouflage from the bush that was farther away, and actually lay with nothing in front of you in between the 2. Totally veg up your rifle, and then you just slowly inch out like a millimeter at a time, and you're completely invisible because you can't tell on the glass the difference. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So I hope that those skills will. They'll pay off. And I hear people talking a lot. So I have 0 experience bow hunting. Never. I can shoot a bag. That's what I shoot in my backyard, except for the time I shot a hole through my fence twice. Recently, my wife is upset, and as she said, I'm going to need a note from you before I'm allowed to shoot in the backyard again. But I always hear people talking about the difficulty and success rate for hunting with a bow. What have you found it to be? I'm assuming it's wildly dependent on the hunter, but you're taking stuff down every year, I would imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
A lot.
But like a guy first year bow hunting. I mean, what should you expect?
Well, I started bow hunting when I was 9, I think, or 10. That's when I got my first animal. And mainly because I had started with a gun, and it was almost, I wouldn't say it was too easy, but my uncle and my grandpa just took my gun away and said, like, you're shooting too many deer. So they said, if you want to do it, you need to do it. You're going to have to learn to do it how the Indians used to do it. And they just gave me like a recurve and some arrows. So then I went home, practiced with that, and that's what I learned with. And then once you take away the element of just being able to see something to kill it,
Yeah.
Like I told you, for me, killing is very easy. Like, that's not hard to do. But if you really start to play that chess game and then try to where you're shooting stuff at like 7 yards or 5, that's a whole different skill set, and it takes a lot of screw ups to get, like, it takes a lot of times where you're like, damn it.
I mean, how many people do you think ever actually, non-hunters, or probably even most hunters, 5 yards is close.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's real close. But it's just like anything. You probably learn this stuff. I've had a couple tips where I've told people, I think I said it when I was in Lanai with some of my buddies, axis hunting.
Which was delicious. We had it for dinner last night.
God,
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that was amazing. I was actually stalking a big herd they were maybe a half mile off the end of the runway for the local airport. But they were like, it was one of those deals where 12 inches is as high as I could get up, and just moving there was noise involved. And I ended up killing the buck, but I shot him. I think I shot him at maybe 4 yards. But what I did was the planes were very, like, they would come in and then they would load and then they would leave. So I moved during propellers.
Yeah.
So, I try to move when there's outside sound, if you're in that position, like learning the elements of sound, like when wind is gusting. Wind is rarely a constant. There's always the gusts for a certain period, and then there's a lag. And like, if you start to learn that, one, it's very good to move when there's other movement behind you or in front of you. Then you can move, and if something picks its head up, it's not going to just instantly see you out of peripheral.
You're not going to be the only thing moving, yeah.
Right. So, that's good. Learning to take the sound when you can. Those are all things that, as a bow hunter, you have to do, because when I started bow hunting, I could only shoot 20 or 30 yards. It's not like, back in the day, if people were shooting a pie plate at 30 yards, that was pretty good. Mm-hmm. Nowadays things have changed so much to where, it's almost like when someone says, well, how far can you shoot your bow? And you tell them, and it's like, well, that's not ethical. But the reality is, we're extremely accurate if you're taught right and if your bow is set up right. I've had a lot of times where I've won money against guys, freehand at 100 with a rifle. If I tell them it's freehand, like, you're standing freehand.
Yep.
That's tough to do.
It's extremely tough to do.
Yeah.
Especially with the rifle, especially if it's got glass on it.
Mm-hmm.
You'd actually be better off with iron sights.
Exactly. And I think with my bow, if it's a calm day, I know I can outshoot, a lot of people. I've done it because I know I could outshoot myself trying to stand that way. So
yeah, your ability with a bow is very angering to me.
Why? You're
very, very good at it. And I watch him like, okay, he's willing that arrow, yes, to not hit the other arrow, but it'll land next to it so he doesn't damage the fleshing. Like, oh, it had 80 yards. Like, no, it's so impressive to watch, man.
I don't like fletching arrows. I got really sick of that.
Yeah,
that's why.
And you're good enough to move your arrows around so you don't have to. If my arrows happen to hit each other, I probably had nothing to do with that. I call that luck.
No, he's being very modest right now. That's his personality. But he's, I think you and I are gonna end up having a shoot off at some point. Like, by the time
I'll just give you the money now.
By the time you put your shit together, I think you're gonna impress yourself at that distance. You're so close, man. You're like, your skill set and your work ethic are going to take over, and this game is going to get easy for you fast.
Well, I just like shooting that bow. Like my days, almost every day since we moved to Montana, cup of coffee, outside.
Morning, sunrise, sunset with a bow and
That's what I
coffee
do.
is the bomb.
Yeah, I go
Coffee
drink.
and wine. It goes with wine too, really well.
It's a classic pairing. Yeah, but I wake up excited to go, open the back door out there and just shoot. Maybe only like shoot 15 arrows, but just go out there and just draw it back and just hit the bag. Except for the 2 times I didn't, but it's all right. It's a vinyl fence.
I've been there, dude. I told you about my tree that's behind my elk target that I have. I practice a lot at 80 yards, and then I also shoot at 100 a lot. But I shoot 80 most.
Yeah.
Like most of my close targets, you see, there's not holes in them. That's kind of normal.
That's true. Like the cat didn't have.
If it's inside of
many
50,
holes. Yeah.
It's very boring.
Yeah, the turkey was a little bit untouched as well too.
Yeah. Anything under the 50 number, but I shoot at 80 a lot, and then when I shoot at 80, I go, I walk around the side of the house right to 100.
Yeah.
There's so many times, man, where I just forget to move my sight, and I pull back, and when I shoot, as soon as I see the arrow like apex about the height of that thing's back, about 40 yards out, I'm like, God damn it. It's in that tree. That thing's, if anyone needs syrup, there's so many freaking holes perforated.
I've done that so many times with my rifles. Like you go to the range and
I
actually it happened at sniper school. Where they're taking tests and guys would be 1,000-yard shot and their dopes dialed in for whatever the last shot was they took the day before. It's just the little stuff, man, for sure.
I'll tell you a story. I was in Montana. And
I already like the story.
Yeah, exactly. I was in Montana. I was on the Milk River. I found this farmer to let me hunt this little creek, this Milk River creek bend. And he had this little bitty small cabin. I was there all by myself. And each morning, I got there a few days early to scout. And while I was scouting, there was a bunch of whitetails, but there was this giant muley that every morning when the sun came up, he'd be in the middle of this, full 1 mile section. And he would get up and then he would exit the field, and where he needed to exit this valley, he'd use this little saddle, which a lot of animals love saddles. Yep. They love indentions.
So do humans.
Yeah. If you're trying to kill, it's a great place. And he would go up to this one spot on the fence. There was this one little tree there, which was growing because it was an indention. There was water there. Obviously that would puddle. So there was life. And he would jump the same spot, and he did it 2-3 mornings in a row. So I thought, all right. I was trying to figure out how I could get close to that and realize, okay, it's pancake flat, like grass flat to that tree, so it's not going to happen. So then I just ranged the tree from the deck of this little, small little shack. And it was 109. So I'm like...
I think I know how this story ends.
So I thought, all right, I can make this happen. I got a whole day to practice. So I freaking took my target, took it to 109, and just, I was just freaking pounding that target. Yep. 109, 109, 109. Sure shit, next morning comes. I'm out there, and I'm kind of just tucked on the back of this little shack, and I can see him. There he is. He's coming. I'm freaking ready, and I'm thinking, okay, he stages up on the front side of the fence before he bounces. So as soon, I'm going to be at full draw, and as soon as he kind of stages to look over and look around, he's going to get it. Well, he staged up, and I was on the trigger, and all of a sudden he just beds down. So I'm like, what the? So I waited, and he just bedded there. All the whitetails evacuated the field. It's just him, and I can see his rack, and I can see him out there looking around. I could see it lay sideways. He's sleeping. He's up. He's licking his butt. I can see all this, so I'm just like, I'm gonna kill that sucker. So I just start crawling, and I crawled.
It's a miserable experience.
Yeah, he was right there. Yeah. Get up to him, kind of rolled over onto my side, pulled my knees up to my chest, laid my bow sideways, and then kind of rose up off my knees and drew back. And then he didn't see that, and I still couldn't see his vitals. So I kind of stood up a little bit more, and then I could see him perfect. And I think he was right at 15, 20 yards. And when I freaking shot, I mean, I was thinking, this is money. And
you
I
still had your 199 dope on, didn't you?
Dude, I freaking sent that arrow like halfway out into that field, and I was so pissed. I mean,
Isn't that a great lesson to learn, though?
Oh, it's a
man, those
beautiful
will
thing.
stick with you forever.
But see, that's the stuff you learn as a bow hunter. Like, you learn those things, whereas if I had a gun,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I would have had my coffee. And like,
Yeah, you could have sat there
Yeah.
and just waited all day long.
Yeah, so you don't, those experiences, and with bow hunting, especially, like, I know some people get bored on my social media because I post turkeys and I post hogs, but all those, I mean, that is, for me to shoot a 3D target in my backyard, that's not practice. That's repetition. There's a difference. You know, real life practice, I mean, it's like people going through the motions, learning jujitsu, or like you said, people learning how to, reload their rifle, pull it. But then when you're doing it in the element and you're actually running live, that's a whole different thing. You learn fundamentals, but then you have to learn game speed. And for me, when I go hunting for pigs, when I go hunting for turkeys, that's game speed for me. I'm able to go out there, and both of them for me have different aspects. Like turkeys can see,
You're seeing like 20x, right?
Yeah, they're in full color. So
I had no idea about that.
Yeah, so when I've killed, lots of turkeys, maybe as many as 100, I don't know. There's years where I might kill 8, travel from state to state to state.
Wow.
And if you can shoot a turkey off the ground with a bow, like get in and you're shooting them at 20 yards, and they can see that good, they can't hear. They can hear well, but they don't.
20x human vision.
They can't smell.
Yeah,
like they
full
can't
color's
smell.
crazy.
So you're not playing the wind. You're playing vision. Like you're literally learning to attack 100% based off, just like your school, 2 guys with freaking spotters, or if there's a tom and 4 hens, there's 4 sets of binoculars just looking around. And
their binos are 20x
Yeah.
the people I was trying to hide from, and still had very poor success often.
Yeah. So, I mean, and then with hogs, their sense of smell is off the charts, right? So, I mean, any wind change. So just learning to constantly monitor wind, and then they see black and white. So to them, movement, like any type of movement at the wrong time catches, it's almost different than a turkey. Turkeys can see color. They can certainly see movement, but hogs see it in a different way. And learning to, like, these are all things I've taught my son and my wife when we stalk, is like with a hog, if their ears are moving, then they're rooting and they're occupied. If the ears are still, then even if their head's down, like they're focusing on something other than what their mouth and their snout's doing. Correct. So, I mean, learning these small little things, even learning to stalk mule deer, where a mule deer might be eating, but all of a sudden that ear turns up and is like pointing your direction. A lot of times they're not going to just try to, pinpoint you. They try to bust you. They try to like, okay, I hear them, and then they like wait for that moment, and then they want certainty, So learning all those little tricks is really what makes bow hunters and bow hunting so awesome. But also it's things that as a gun hunter, you learn a different aspect. Like as a gun hunter, you would probably learn a lot more like about skylining,
Yeah,
it's
you
like,
would. And you're never going to learn those lessons on a 3D range either, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like that stuff, watching the actual behavior in the wild and those indications. The wind is an interesting aspect. We, in sniper school, shooter spotter, right? So you're spotting the rounds. Probably the best thing a spotter can do for you, other than tell you where your rounds are actually hitting at distance, is read the wind. So we spent a lot of time reading the wind, but there was never any concern about smell. So it's that's something that I'm going to have to.
That's your number one thing.
But I never
one.
once worried about that. Like that just, to me, like we would worry about sound as we got proximate to where we were going to go do our job. And the farther away you can be louder as you get closer, you'd have to be much quieter. But yeah, the wind's a challenging one. So I have, no experience being concerned with the wind other than how it's going to affect the trajectory of a bullet.
Well, that knowledge that you have there is going to put you at such a huge advantage. Because one of the things with archery that really separates good from great is when people really start to learn the maths, like ballistic math, drift, tailwind, headwind, down pressure, up pressure. There's times where you can have a tailwind behind an arrow, but that doesn't mean your arrow is going to hit high on the target because it's getting more speed. Sometimes there's lift, sometimes there's push. There's times you have to learn to read that of how that's working, and then even starting to be able to pay attention to what the crosswind is, which, like when I was shooting, I had to ask Cullen.
Yeah, you could see it because we were tucked up in there.
Yeah, I was like, what's the wind doing as soon as you clear that tree? Because of the way the contour of the land came around, I knew that there was, almost like a curving swoop to the wind, but it wasn't happening until 50 yards. So from 50 to 100, there's a completely different play at hand versus, 0 to 50. And learning that, and then also being able to recognize, like, you're going to be smart enough to know approximately what a wind feels like, because you're going to know, okay, this is about a 10-mile-an-hour click, right? And then you're going to say, okay, well, at 100 with a 10 click, I've got a 12-inch drift. You're going to be able to start applying that to the field. And then for you'll either start to learn, okay, am I going to aim off, or do I want to learn to use my bubble? Mm-hmm. What does half a bubble do for me?
Are you talking about leaning the actual bow?
Yeah, you can lean into the wind, so you can whichever
Put
way.
a little English on it, if
exactly.
you will.
Yeah, exactly. And really good target archers, that's one thing that I learned when I shot with the team is, we shot out to 90 meters. So, and most of my practice, I think the most practice I had in a year was right around 30,000 arrows. And
wow.
I would say 25,000 of that 30 was all at 90 meters, 99 yards. So you learn, like at my house, I had two 90-meter butts. So for me, I got more shooting time in. Yeah. I would shoot down, I would shoot back. I would shoot down, I would shoot back. Just shoot down.
Oh, you're cutting off the commute time.
Yeah, but what's important about that too is because a lot of winds in people's areas are prominent in a certain direction, I was constantly flipping the table, right? So I'm not just learning a right to left wind. I'm also learning, left to right. So, and like I said, learning push, learning if you got an uplift, all that stuff's relevant. And you'll start to put all those pieces together to where if you have to make a shot where it's blowing, it'll make a big difference in your shooting. And even learning, and this is stuff I've learned not from a background like yours. I've learned it from I want to kill something, so even at times where you're like, what is the wind doing?
Do you use the powder stuff? I've seen people talking.
For sure in my pocket. Yeah, it's always in my pocket. Like my pockets and my pants, I'm very strategic. Like when my clothes get put away or when they come out, there's things that are always the same.
You're streamlined for sure.
Yeah. I've got like face paint left pocket, wind indicator's always in the right pocket because I can't grab a wind indicator with my left hand. So it's always there so I can puff, put it back in, and go. My release pouch is always on my right side.
See, that's stuff I still have to figure out. Like I might be able to hit the foam elk at 100 yards, but I still got some stuff I need to figure out as far as those efficiencies go.
Well, even like my binocular harness, no one's making a harness where the rangefinder is like I want my rangefinder where my movement. One, I want to be able to be solid with my rangefinder. And what I've found to be most solid is the side of my bow, like the side of my limb. So my bow is always tight at the ready. So I've actually got, on my lanyard, I've got a hole popped, my range.
I created mine after seeing a picture of yours.
Okay.
I was like, Okay, that's
Yeah,
smart.
'cause then
I
you're right
it
here.
hangs right there by the bino too, and it's just
You're right up, you're right down, like, and you're able to keep your movement within your box of your body, right? As soon as you start bringing an arm out of your radius, that's something that they're going to pick up. But if you can keep everything directly in that line, then so that's how I am with everything. I want a glass from the I set my glass on the top of my cam. My bow is always hanging. I've got a cool little bow holder that hangs off my
Yep,
belt.
I've seen
Have
that
you
picture
seen
too.
it?
Yep.
So I can just turn my bow sideways,
Take the
set it
pressure
on
off
there.
your shoulder, yep.
Yeah, and then I'm just sitting with my glass right up there. I can glass, and then if I need to, I can set them up there too and grab my rangefinder and double check that, hit my sight. I mean, all of my movement is with a 12-inch space.
Yeah.
And I mean, that stuff like that is what a lot of the rookies they don't start to comprehend that.
I think I was telling you about my gear that I wore on my first deployment versus the gear I wore on my last one.
Yeah, you're so like me like that.
I was the Michelin man. I had, a Gerber.
Yep.
And I had a backup for the Gerber too. I had batteries and backup for those, and I probably had a bandana stuffed in a pocket somewhere. But, as the years went on and the experience increased, it was, that hasn't been used, see you later. And it went from the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man to basically everything I carried could fit in the outline or the circumference of the ballistic plate behind my vest. And I nerded out on it. Like, magazines always go in with the bullet pointing in one direction, so regardless of how I grab it, I know how it goes into the gun. And it got to the point, I know exactly what you're talking about. I got about 2 weeks to dial that in.
Yeah, well, what's funny is when the worst time for me is the first week of whitetail season. And every year I don't like whitetail season in the first elk hunt, because I get out there and I forget, like, because I do pack differently for elk than I do for whitetails. So I just get out there and realize how inefficient, like, wait a minute, I don't wear my bugle tube here. It goes on this side.
Yeah,
So when I
rusty.
slide it back, it goes here. And wait a minute, where's my freaking, trying to figure out, wait a minute, where's my butt wipe at? I never have it in the bottom of the bag. I always have it on the outside pocket. Like, things like all those little things. And then with whitetails, because I'm always going to my stand and back, and I self-film a lot. So I'm taking, I self-film a lot.
Yeah.
So it's almost more important to know, okay, camera arm goes on this side pocket, camera's in this pocket, upside down, need the spare battery here. Like, you start to learn this routine, and then it's, okay, I always need, my grunt tube has to be on chest pocket. I can't dig it out if I need it. Horns are here. Learning to have that extra bow hanger to put on the tree. I mean, all that little stuff, you get in a tree, and it's a minute and a half to 2 minutes of just literally like laying your stuff out.
You got to set up shop.
Yeah, just set up shop quick, and then I'm there, and I'm like there for the day. All's good. I mean, then I'm total. As long as I've got a couple peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, I'm gonna roll.
Not a bad call, for
They're
sure.
so good.
So what would you say, because I'm sure you've been around every level of hunter, from good to what somebody you'd look at and be like, I can't believe you actually do this for fun or for a living. What are the most common mistakes that you see people make?
Yeah, there's honestly, one mistake that a lot of people make is buying a camouflage that looks good on a shelf. Because
Gucci flage?
yeah, because the problem is, if you really want to know how well camo looks, how effective it is, you don't look at it in the store. Go put it on the other side of the store and look at it, because a lot of these cool patterns turn solid. The Ridge Reaper Baron pattern, Under Armour's Baron pattern, in my opinion, is the best hunting pattern ever, because there's highs, there's like high tones and there's low tones. When there's too much mid-tone, it becomes flat, and you end up looking like a burnt stump walking around as soon as you're looking at something at 75 yards. Having a camo pattern that has true depth to it, it might not, look like a real leaf, or it might not look like a real piece of bark or limb or whatever. But when it comes to true effectiveness from appearance, it makes a big difference. That, and then I would say if you take that away, the next thing is going to be people learning how to actually walk in the woods. Because there's people that are half my weight that I swear I feel like they've got Herman Munster's shoes on, because it's like
we had that guy with us every night on patrol. Like, I'm just doing my best ninja. To myself, I hadn't made a noise, and it, you know what most commonly it was? A guy would be back there like, I'm like, I'm being sneaky here, dude. Do you really need to do that right now? Like, come on. Or the classic metal on metal, ding, which nothing sounds like that in nature.
Yep.
And then the dogs go, and then it's like, oh, here we go, game on.
That's the one that actually brings to another good point. I don't want to get back to the walking part, but whenever you're calling, whether it's whitetails, if you rattle, if you grunt, if you're elk calling and you call, or if you're predator calling, anytime you've made that initial contact, if at any time after that you involve a sound that is foreign, I mean, I found that like whitetails can take you breaking a stick or rustling a leaf or even something falling off your tree and hitting the ground. But if all of a sudden there's a zipper or Velcro or metal on metal, at that point it's over. Like, especially with moose hunting, that's one of the biggest ones, because moose will respond to you. I've had them respond over a mile away. Wow. And, the caller, I've got a really good guide up in Alberta. 2 of them actually, well, 3 of them. Bert, Dusty, and Jeremy are all awesome guides. And once they start to call, like, they'll tell you, are you situated? Because once they put that call out there,
it's game time.
If you decide to have like a Snickers bar, like, they're just going to pack the shit up and go. Because once you've turned everything's ears your direction, learning to eliminate foreign sounds is critical. And then also learning, if you do make a sound, I've always found that the single sound isn't really what gets you, it's the follow-up. It's just like you look at poachers, most poachers that are successful, their preferred tool is like a 22, and it's always a single shot. It's a single bolt action shot.
Really?
Yeah, because that's the most confiscated one, because it's one shot, and if it doesn't die, they don't shoot twice, because it's the same thing. So, and with whitetails, what I found, and I've done a lot of studies where I've sat in a stand and the field's been full, and all of a sudden I'll just kind of go like that, but freeze. And I mean, everything's up and everything's like looking around like, what the heck is that? But if you make a noise after that...
Yeah, I was going to say, you got their attention. If you follow it up with it, they're going to bolt.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I found the same thing with archery equipment. A lot of times if a deer is reacting to the bow, it's not necessarily like the sound of the bow. It's more, I've had a lot of times where you can hear the ballistic coming. So they're reacting to the bow, but then they're also hearing, now they're turning their attention to that direction. And depending on the type of fletching you shoot or the type of broadhead, like a lot of broadheads, especially fixed blades that have big openings inside of the blades, they're channels, right? You can hear them. So a lot of times when I'm working with my hunting bows, I'll actually, stand behind something and have someone shoot it and be like, okay, how much noise is coming in here? That's
an interesting step. Thinking back, I had put some broadheads on maybe a month ago or something. I was shooting it, and one of the first things that stuck out to me was the difference in noise that they make flying through the air.
Oh yeah, and there's certainly ones that I can show you that have less noise.
Well, these are the fixed ones, like you're talking about, with like a large air gap.
Yeah, and I actually learned that when I did my brown bear hunt up on the peninsula. I asked the outfitter, I said, is there anything archery-wise that you do or don't want me to have? And he goes, honestly, can you make sure like your broadheads, like check them for sound? Because with bears, like I told you, when you shoot and they get hit, they're trying to pinpoint where it came from and then determine, is this fight or flight for me? So if you give away, especially with the bow, and you're trying to get, 40 yards or less and something that's extremely deadly, you don't want to give away that position. So, I went in, I shot a broadhead that was very compact, solid blades, no openings, so that, sound-wise it was really good. And even taking small steps, like you noticed when we built your arrows, tipping and tailing your vane.
Yeah.
That's because that little lip, just rounding that, changes frequency.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was actually really glad that I got to go through that whole process of wrapping it, and I think I fletched like 5 out of the 6 of those. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. And that I could have easily built your bow before you came, but I really wanted you to be there to see the detail. It's...
Yeah, I had no idea. I went to an archery store. I was like, I would like to buy a bow, please. And when you hand it to me, I would like to be able to shoot it. That was my level of understanding. And they said, here, sir, is your bow. And I went and shot it. No clue all of the wizardry is the word I'll use that goes into making that thing work. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, you're going to enjoy it. People are going to be impressed. If you ever show people how you shoot, I think they'll appreciate it. But going back to common mistakes.
Yeah, moving.
Learning to walk quiet, like this was something my uncle taught me when I was probably 10 or 12, is he's like, do not use your entire foot. So I'm barefoot a lot on spot and stalks.
Really?
Yeah, a lot. I'm barefoot. I'm barefoot or socks. Like I have a thick pair of wool socks in my backpack that I can pull over, and they're knee high. So I always take my pants, fold them, pull them all the way up, because socks are so much quieter than any type of performance material when it comes to slipping through dry grass.
And you'll feel better too.
Yeah.
That you're going to get more tactile sensation from your foot.
Yeah. And you can, obviously in elk country, I've had some side hill stuff where you get back and you're like, damn, I wish I could have got that bull, because I really don't.
I don't want to hurt for a week.
But learning to walk quiet, and like I said, at the very beginning, success as a hunter comes from your ability to not leave an imprint. If you don't imprint, then opportunity flourishes and it presents itself, and maybe even multiple opportunities. And what I found is even though I feel like I may have to go a mile before I'm hunting, if I'm taking precaution from the step of like getting out of my truck, not slamming a door, like pushing it shut, not like ripping the zipper open. Like I've had times where I've got 50, 60 yards away from my truck and there's a buck feeding out in a CRP field. I had no idea I was there. And that's an opportunity. Now I've got my opportunity. I haven't even gone to my stand. So people learning to, and especially at the end of the night, this is one thing that kind of makes my hair stand up. I've been on places where I've hunted with guys and all of a sudden it's dark and the hunt's over and I can like hear them coming out. To me, like, get me as far away from that place for tomorrow as possible.
Why tip your hat like that?
Yeah, it's outside voice all the time. It's no matter where I'm going. Like I ride my bike a lot to my stands. Bikes are great just because, I think animals know two-legged creatures. So if you're walking in the same stride all the time, they understand that. But, I move, I try to stay on the blades of my feet when I walk or on my tiptoes. I try to map out things even if I'm just going to a stand. And I found that I've had so many opportunities just by stumbling upon something or chance. And, I elk hunt mainly when I go up to Alberta, but I also have a black bear tag, a whitetail tag, a mule deer tag, and a moose tag in my pocket.
Oh, wow. So you get a full variety of things
I get everything.
Present yourself with.
And I get a wolf tag. I always get everything I can. And I'm pretty much still hunting from point A to getting back to point A at night. I'm trying to, there's times where I might have to cover ground. Obviously, if you have an elk bugling back, you're going to cover ground. And I've written articles about be fast, be still. There's times to be fast. There's times where you've got that one blocker that you're going to have for the next half a mile, and you better get there. Or if all of a sudden the animal's just walking away. Like, if you can see it walking away, go. but all of a sudden, and I always focus on eyeballs. To me, keeping my attention on eyeballs, because as soon as something turns, if you can see the eye can see you. So that's one thing for me is, if I see a buck and he's in a field and I'm doing a spot and stalk, I don't take my eye, unless I'm still, I'll turn my head to maybe talk with someone or, converse with the camera person. But other than that, I look at the ground, I pick, I'm stopped, I pick my chess game, and then I fixate on the animal, and then I methodically go with my piece. And then if you're hunting with someone else, really learn that one person is way easier to get away with if you ever get busted. One figure, you have a chance. Two figures, you got no chance. So when guys walk side by side, or if I'm out and I'm hunting with a camera guy, it's like, dude, straight behind me.
Yeah, present one profile.
Straight behind me and stay close enough to me to where if we both have to stop, there's not a big gap. Especially when you're in that moment, because that way, if he stops, even if he bumps up against me, that's way different than there being separation and him taking that 1 or 2 steps. So, really small things like that add up big for people. And then, I guess the next thing would be just really putting in the time to understand your equipment. Bow hunting is a responsibility. You really need to have a full understanding of what your bow can do and what your bow can't do. And, just like today, you learned a lot of things about your bow. Now, if you would have just picked up that bow from the shop, went elk hunting, you probably could have had a great elk hunt, but there probably would have been, you're at a higher risk of having something go wrong with the shot,
And I would have never seen it coming. Even like you said, the first thing you caught on the rest, I had noticed it, but I was looking at something else. You saw an indication of something, and I was like, oh, I guess that's just the residue from the arrow.
Yeah, to me, I looked at your bow, and as soon as I pulled it back, I'm like, okay, this thing's costing you big.
Yeah.
And it was so small, but it was, the arrow rest was actually bumping something as it came up. It was a different brand. It was a brand that I've had similar problems with, so I got away from that brand. But those little things, man, do those start to add up big time. And especially really treating your arrows, they're individuals. You have to really pay attention to every single arrow. Is the knock index right? Is this thing straight? Are the fletchings on? Once you dedicate those arrows that you're going to use in the hunting situation, keep them separate and treat them like if you bang them around too much or something could go wrong. A lot of people are just really, they're kind of just dumb with their equipment. They drop their sight around. Like a lot of people ask me why I shoot the length stabilizer I shot, and why I put the length stabilizer that you shoot on your bow is because when you set it down,
the sight doesn't touch.
Exactly. I don't want the sight touching the mud and all that stuff. So just small little things like that, and then practicing how you play. This is something that goes back, indefinitely through any of the sports that I've ever been part of. Is just getting out and shooting your bow sitting on the ground, kneel behind a tree and, shoot kneeling. Can you draw your bow like that? Can you draw your bow and then let it down slow enough to where you're not going to get busted? And if you can't say yes to this, then you need to be shooting more weight, because there's going to come a time where you draw back and the animal's going to maybe see something. It's going to turn and it's going to look at you. You're going to be sitting there struggling and you're going to bounce your arrow off the arrow rest, trying to let the bow down aggressively instead of just learning the pull and the let down motion. And then I guess the other thing is just commitment. I know that it's a hobby for most people, but it's still, to me, it's a commitment. I had 1 year, it was the year that we moved here. All my stuff was packed up. I didn't get to practice for that whole chaotic month, and I went to Alberta. And I just made a couple terrible shots, and the guide actually just said, dude, what is wrong? This isn't. And I said, honestly, my head's not even here, man. I didn't know where my gear was. Half my shit's not here. I didn't pack right.
Eats into your confidence too.
Yeah. So he just told me, like, what do you want to do? And I think on the first day, I think one day I missed a mule deer. I missed 2 mule deer. One day I missed a mule deer one day, then I missed another mule deer the next day. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, honestly, I want to take the day off. Like, I need to go back to camp. I need to pretend like hunting season's not open. And I said, I'm going to pack my shit back in my bow case. I'm going to pack it in there the way I should have packed it when I came. And I'm going to unzip it. And I'm going to take it all back out and organize my stuff the way that I want. And then I'm going to shoot until dark. And then we can hunt tomorrow. So that's what I want to do. And then 2 days later, made an awesome shot on a bull. But if I wouldn't have...
If you wouldn't have done that, I bet you it would have been a different result.
And that was a wake-up call to me of, it doesn't matter how long you've done this or how good you are. Like, if you can't rely on your system and you haven't practiced enough to where subconscious can control a lot of the elements that it needs to, then at that point you're rolling dice. You don't want to roll dice when it comes to, shooting something, right?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, ethically, you're aiming to take life.
Yeah.
You should probably take it pretty seriously. Yeah, there's that currency and getting to that point with practice where the subconscious can kind of take over. I feel a lot of people in a lot of disciplines, they get to that point and then they fail to realize that if you don't continue working, you'll lose that proficiency as well too. If you don't have that currency, all that work you put in, it'll erode away. Like even with me, with guns. I mean, I was around guns for almost 2 decades, and when I take time off the range, it's just like, it doesn't feel right at all. And I can largely do a lot of the stuff with weapons subconsciously.
Yep.
And that's, you take some time off, and I get exhausted because I'm thinking about stuff that I normally wasn't thinking about. It was kind of, there's more than just getting that skill. You have to maintain that skill.
Oh, yeah. And I think for me, too, I'm serious. What I really like about bow hunting, especially now, is I'm like really geeking out about how good can I cook this stuff.
I have no relationship with Traeger at all, and I went and bought one based off of the pictures that you guys were posting and how you were talking about it. And I tried to hide from my wife how much it was, and I failed, as I usually do, hiding things from her. And she was very upset until she took a bite. The first thing I cooked was these amazing ribeyes. Smoked them for an hour. I just went on Google, Traeger ribeye recipe.
Yep.
Followed the instructions, and maybe 2 chews into her first bite, she was just like, all right, that thing's awesome. It can stay.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. It's life-changing.
It's a completely different presentation and culinary experience.
Yeah, for me, I got to the point, actually right outside that window there is my tailgater. It's a portable one.
I've seen it, yeah. With the
and I can
collapsible base.
I can plug that into my Ram truck. And seriously, dude, when I go out west, I have 2 Yetis. I've got a full-size one, which I keep a lot of my grill stuff in, and this is a good tip for people too. I've got a full-size Yeti. I've got a big 210. And in that Yeti, I keep some steel pans, paper plates, knives, forks, some cleaning supplies, some cooking gloves, just so you're not getting that smell on your hands all the time. And then I have my vacuum sealer, vacuum bags, and then I have a cutting board and then bleach wipes and my knives. And I can literally prep and cook on that cutting board, and I can cook everything I keep my pellets in the Yeti too, the bigger one. And then once it comes to killing time, I can literally cut up that whole thing, process it, plug my vacuum sealer into my truck,
and it's on.
Vacuum seal right there, start just launching those into the big cooler. And then a lot of times my small cooler, which I keep my drinks or milk or whatever else in, then it's time for me to roll home. So I'll dump that out, put my supplies and tools in that thing, and I'm rolling. And I mean, it totally changes your perspective. I wasn't really concerned on whether I shot another hog like last week when I was in Oklahoma, but I really wanted to shoot one to put that freaking big double butt on that grill, which
I'm
is
not gonna lie, it looks amazing.
yeah,
So we're gonna eat it very soon.
we're gonna be diving into that sucker, but it like brings a whole new realm to appreciation of being a hunter. It's like, man, I'm excited about a friend getting to try this, and he's gonna enjoy it, and it's an opportunity to talk about that experience, you know. And then you're, instead of like watching that hunt on TV, you're able to tell the story because everyone's there enjoying it at that moment in time. So I mean, it's such a good tool for the hunting community. I'm like really glad they broke out of, they were so focused on barbecue and culinary, which they're awesome at. But once they started to like realize, wait a minute, there's an outdoor market here. Yeah. So, Traeger Outdoors, and, if you're out there, Traeger Outdoors, you can follow them on Instagram, and they share a lot of my stuff. And
you're going to just beware, you're going to get hungry if you follow them because the pictures are salivating.
And I didn't even have the app, dude. Like I wasn't a picture master, but now
you got it.
Andy
well, I only know one tool on that app that probably has 500. I'm a creature of habit.
Yeah, that's hilarious. But
I almost feel like I've been cooking food wrong. Like I'm actually upset at myself for sticking with like the Weber. Not that it tasted good at the time, but in comparison, it's like now I'm like, okay, what haven't I cooked on this grill? I did the pork chops, so I've done the chicken. I haven't done any fish yet, but then it came with that recipe book where it's talking about the desserts. I think I'm going to dive into that soon.
Dude, have you cooked a pie on there yet?
No.
Oh damn. You cook a granny's apple pie on there, and I mean, it's like a whole new world.
Do you smoke it to start off with to like infuse the flavor?
Oh yeah, baby. Oh. That smoked crust is so good. And
you will have a picture of that from me the day after when I get home.
I've got to get some of that whiskey from your homeboys.
Yes, the Lead Slinger whiskey?
Yeah, I need some Lead Slinger, and I'm going to drop some of my smoky balls in there.
Smoky balls are delicious. They were delicious for sure, man. We got to talk at least a little bit about your archery background. Like it's your mastery of the arena is like.
Do we have to?
No, we don't. I love mastery, and like I don't know much about archery, but you have like a ton of 300 perfect scores where it looks like you shot one arrow instead of I think 30 that you had to shoot. I don't know. So you shot. Give me the wave tops. You represented the U.S. in the professional shooting world.
Yeah, I more or less started bow hunting when I was 10, and then my dad took me to a few little archery clubs, and we did some. At that time, there weren't 3D targets, like foam targets with scoring rings on there. It was like people made their own out of like housing, like remember the old foam
yes
that you'd put on the outside?
Yeah.
People would glue them together and then take wire and they would cut them. And at our club, at Fox Valley Archers in Illinois, every year we would have a shoot where every member would make one target. So there was. And things look super primitive. It's like going to
there had to have been some really ugly animals.
Yeah, pretty soon your kids will have like soapbox derby cars where you're like, if yours looked like mine and Harry's, it was pretty much square with wheels on it. And then there's the dads that like are really geek out about it.
Yeah, now they 3D print it out and it looks like a Formula One car.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how the targets were. There were some really crap ones. There were some good ones. But anyway, I did that and didn't really, I really wasn't into it. I was just a bow hunter, hunted a few times a year. But then through high school, I shot some. I definitely shot. I was mainly a hunter. But then I was really focused on just sports. Sports, and, I think you understand my personality. I'm very task. Like I have to have, if I'm task mapped, I'm really happy. If there's not task mapped, I'm not happy. So what happened was I ended up hurting my knee in football. So I had this little gap of like 3 months where I had to rehab and stay off of it. And while I was doing that, I was actually driving down this road and I saw this sign that said 3D archery shoot. So I just thought, I wonder what that's by. So I pulled in there and there's a whole bunch of people with bows and I could see targets and stuff. So I cruised home, grabbed my bow and went back. And they said, yeah, there's 40 targets. Well, in that 7-year time spread, a lot of things changed with like target archery. So I went out there, and honestly, after the first 20 targets, maybe, I didn't have any arrows left. And honestly, that was the only thing up until that point, because like in high school, I could do track, cross country, tennis, basketball. You know, I wrestled a year. I could do football, and you know, pick up sticks, whatever. I don't give a crap.
Yeah,
you know, we doing wheelbarrow races. I'm in. You know, it doesn't matter, right? And this 3D archery thing kicked my dick in. I mean, I was butthurt, you know, and
can't finish the course.
So I literally said, "Can I come back?" And they said, "Yeah." So I went up to a Gander Mountain, bought another dozen arrows, and went back. And I saw the guys, like at the end of the shoot, I saw the guys that won. They all had these shirts on with like the local archery shop on the back, and they were like shooters for that shop. So the next day, man, I was in that shop.
Yep.
And I was just sitting there just like stalking these dudes, just watching them practice, asking them questions. And it just so happened that the guy in the shop was like behind on getting people's crap done. So he ended up looking over. He's like, "Hey, kid, are you doing anything?" And I go, "No." And he goes, "Here." And I just heard this guy chewing them out because he said, "Hey, I've had those freaking the arrows on order for 2 weeks." And he said, "Man, they'll be done anytime. They're just drying." And he said, "All right." He's like, "Well, I'm going to wait around. I'll be back in an hour or something." And he's just like, "Okay." So he ends up coming over. He's like, "Hey, kid, you doing something?" I said, "No." He's like, "Come here. I'm going to show you how to fletch arrows." So he's just like, "Okay,
gotta fill this order real fast."
He's like, "Take this, put it in there." Kind of the same thing you learned today. And so I did that. And an hour later, I'm like, "Hey, I got these done." He's like, "Okay, do those." And I look over and it's like, holy God. Like it was
pile of all piles.
Dude, it was just shabs with tickets on top of them. So I'm just sitting there just learning to fletch arrows. And then one thing led to another. Next thing I know, after like 3 weeks, I think it was about a month, I ended up saying, every day he said, "Just come in at noon." And then at 9 o'clock I was leaving, and he was just teaching me how to do all this stuff. And I remember he was handing out, it was the second time he had handed out paychecks. And I go, "Hey, do I get a paycheck?
Can I have one of those?"
And he goes, "How can you put value on what I'm teaching you?" But he like said it with a perfect straight face. And I said, "Well, dude, your value doesn't run my car. Like I need some gas money.
This value doesn't go in this there tank."
Yeah. So I was pouring concrete in the mornings. I poured concrete from like 6 in the morning till noon. And then from noon till 9, I was in this archery shop. And I started shooting all these local tournaments. And then really by the time the 2 months or 3 months was up for my rehab, I told my dad, I said, "Hey, I think I'm going to back out of this football scholarship for to do work at this archery shop." My dad, some of my dad's background. He was really good about like letting me make decisions, but that for this one, he kind of just said, "I've got to kind of step in here and let you know this is a terrible decision." Because I told him I was leaving. I could have played college football, got an education, but I left that to make $4.10 an hour at an archery shop. Like, wasn't wise. And honestly, I think it was, there's probably only a handful of people that have ever done it and got to maybe a place where I'm at. So, I just went in head first, man, and work ethic. Yeah. It was all about like, this is what I want. And I told myself, I'm going to be the best archer there is around here. And when I'm done with that, I'm going to be the best archer in this area. And when I'm done with that, I'm going to be the best archer in the States. And when I'm done with that, and so that's what it started at regional tournaments or local tournaments. Then it went to, and actually I used to shoot right where you were in Madison. That's that was my hub between Rockford, Illinois and Madison. That was where I shot 2-3 tournaments a weekend. And then I got invited to my first world championship, went to that. And meanwhile, I was like living in my truck, putting up tents. Like I couldn't rent a car, wasn't old enough. Couldn't rent a car, couldn't afford a hotel. So, I had like a little 2-man tent, and I would take this sucker out of my truck And, you know, so I remember one time I slept in that tent. I was in that tent in a hurricane in Flatwoods, West Virginia. It was at a world championship, and I didn't realize this hurricane would come, and all I knew is I had to get in my tent because the water was coming through this campground so heavy to where it was like the tent was getting ready to go, and it was the only one I got, so I just jumped in it to hold it down. And I remember, like, when all the freaking dust settled, someone's just like, hey, is there someone in that tent? They're like, there was a tornado that came through here. And it's like, oh man, I was just worried about losing my tent. But honestly, when I made that step to the higher level, because I was shooting good scores locally, but what frustrated me was that there wasn't like organization to the shoots. People could keep their own score. And it got to the point where once my scores got...
I could see that could be problematic.
Yeah. Once my scores got to a certain level, then it got to the point where I remember I went to a tournament. It was actually, I think it was just south of where you were in Madison. It was in Janesville. Some of the local shooters that were good archers, but that I was beating at the time, you know, it started to get this thing, well, he's a pencil pusher. He just cheats. So I went into this tournament, and I go to sign up, and I look down, and there's a freaking index card with John Dudley on it. So I go, hey, what's up with, what's that about? And he goes, yeah, this asshole cheats. If he ever shows up, you know, we're going to follow him on the range.
No
to see.
way.
And I said, dude, this is going to be awesome. I'm like, let's roll. So we went out, and I mean, at that time, that was like lighting a fire under me. I'm like, okay, this is it. You know, now it's like people questioning my work ethic.
Your integrity.
Yeah, exactly. So I went out and just smoked that course. And literally at that point, I just said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going in. So I just jumped on one of the tours and shot as a semi-pro and did really well that first year. And this was in 97. And then at the end of 97, I decided to turn pro. And then, you know, I shot on 3 or 4 pro tours for probably my first 6 or 7 years. It was, you know, right at about 30 to 40 professional tournaments a year, like every,
It's a lot of weekends.
Yeah.
I'm assuming
yeah.
they're
Oh,
all
yeah. Yeah, that's all I did.
I mean, that's 3/4 of the year.
Just shot a bow, tournament. I mean, it got to the point where my practice was competition. And that's what, like, when people want to know how do I deal with like performance pressure, my way of doing it was like, I'm going in head first. Like, I'm going to the deep end and I'm jumping in, and I'm going to suck. I know I'm not going to do good, but I also know that that's going to piss me off enough to where I'm going to figure out a way to keep my head afloat. And so that's what I did. I went in and was, you know, terrible for probably 9 months until all of a sudden I started to realize, okay, listen, the only thing that's preventing me from doing well is me. Like, no one, it's not like this is a fight where this guy's like slinging arrows at me and I'm like, you know.
It's you and the target.
Yeah, it's me and the target. That's what it is. It's a one-on-one game. And so I started doing that. And then, it was actually all my evolution through different elements of the game. So there's like 3D archery, which is foam animal targets with scoring rings on there. Then there's indoor archery, which, you know, is a completely different type of game. Then there's field archery, which is the most technical, very technical. You learn a lot of mass, you learn a lot of angles, and you learn every shot's different. Every single shot's different. I mean, it's like real life scenario, but on paper. And then there was FIDA archery at the time, which was 30, 50, 70, 90 meter stuff on a line. And, you know, and when I shot with the team, you know, my specialty was field, and I always thought it's because really my background was hunting.
With all those things that you
encountered.
encountered.
So, I mean, when it came to technical, and it seemed like 2 things happened. Field archery, one, started to really pinpoint technicality and technique and form, because your body you have to make shots on angles. That was element 1. Element 2 was your fitness, which at the time, archery and bow hunting wasn't where it is today. Today, people are like hunting athletes.
Yeah.
You know, there's a movement for that. But at the time, like I almost was looked at like a meathead. Like people looked at me like I was a meathead because most archers didn't fit an athletic profile. But for me, I knew I made several comebacks in tournaments by actually using my fitness to my advantage. Like there's rules, like once you touch a stake, the clock starts. So the group, each shooter has 2 minutes to make the shot, but the clocks don't start until you touch the stake. So a lot of people, you know, they would have a shot and then the next target would be, you know, 700 feet up. And so people would kind of lollygag up there and get up there, and then they'd set their crap down and people would kind of catch their breath. Well, if I was if I was shooter one, leadoff guy on the next target, like, freaking lace up, boys, because I'm touching that stake.
Sprint up there, touch the stake, and get your shot off.
Your heartbeat against mine, sucker. Because a lot of these guys I knew, their face won't even be the right color by the, you know.
Yeah. I think I understand the body type you're describing.
Yeah, and it, you know, that worked to my advantage, and, you know, and then I think I really started to learn the importance of when I'm prepared that way for my hunts, especially Western hunts, like this is game changing, because now, you know, I'm not like having to take a downhill shot, you know, off a cliff at a mule deer and shooting high over the back. Like I know, okay, crap, this is 40 degrees, you know, I'm going to have to cut 9%. Like, you know, you start, because again, there wasn't angle compensation rangefinders then.
Yeah.
So like, you know, I don't know if you saw, but I made a post of what I did back then was I actually had a ballistic chart with angles and percentage of cut for up and down that was laminated on the side of my rangefinder, and then on the outside of my rangefinder was an inclinometer.
Oh, yeah.
So I could, you know, grab the angle, hold it, look, okay, 42 degrees, then I would look at my chart. Okay,
yep.
I got to...
It's a dope card is what it is.
Yeah.
Same thing we have on our rifles.
Here's my cut, then I'd make the range, and all of a sudden you just start learning, like, you know, and then also learning how, you know, learning the correct way to learn from your mistakes. So say I made a mistake on a target that was on a 55-degree slope, and it was a bomb of a shot, but, you know, I make my shot, and all of a sudden my arrow's 10 inches low on the target. Well, since targets are round, I mean, it's symmetrical. So instead of me trying to figure out how much I need to turn my sight to put those next 3 arrows in the bullseye, at that point I'm like, okay, shit, I made that mistake. So now I'm aiming 10 inches high. I'm aiming 4th ring high for the next 3 shots, taking these, you know, I'm going to keep my loss to a minimum. I'm not going to try to walk my arrows in there. I'm just going to take those 3, get the hell out of here, and say, that thing ate my lunch. But for 1 arrow, not for 2. A lot of people wouldn't do that. They would be so, you know, they would just want to have the right number on their sight instead of just saying, okay.
Really? Yeah, I was always, you know, like if it was close to where I could see impact, I would just hold. Super comfortable. And same thing for wind. A lot of guys like to dial their wind in so the crosshair can be exactly on what they're trying to hit. I actually preferred to hold the wind just visually off of it. I mean, it's an art form more than a science anyway. So, but yeah, it's crazy, man, to listen to hear you talk about your experience and see like the mastery in action. It's pretty damn impressive.
Well, I think you've had some awesome people on your podcast. I mean, I'm like 7 minutes from being all the way through all your podcasts. I really like them.
No way, I uploaded one today.
You know, yeah, exactly. You know what sucks is just because of the way business is going, you know, I've got I feel bad saying it, but I've got, you know, I have to have someone cut my grass. What sucks about that is I loved Rogan's podcast, and I was always up to date because my grass grows like crazy. So I was always on my lawnmower for an hour and a half, 3 times a week. So I would that's when I got in my podcast. And like for you now, the only time I can get the podcast in is when I'm like driving to or from airport, or if I'm on an airplane, you know, that's when I get them in. But you've had some super awesome people on the podcast. But the one thing, you know, for people listening, the one thing that is a common denominator with everybody, regardless of the mind, you know, regardless of the tool set, regardless of their craft, is work ethic. I mean, that it's easy for people to talk about. And
Yeah.
I've got so many people around me that talk like they talk a game, but when it comes to really, really doing that stuff, there's a difference, and that's what separates people. In a hunting camp, it's the same thing every time. Night one, everybody's up, packing, people are pumped, people stay up late, a couple guys drink till 3.
Yep.
They get
Probably
that,
perform great the next
they
day.
get that 2 hours of sleep, they go out, they hunt hard, they're back at dark, awesome. Next day, they're asleep a little bit earlier, they come in for lunch. Then on that third day, all of a sudden now it's like one guy's not out before, one guy's leaving after daylight. And then by the fourth day, I've got people where people are taking naps back at camp in the middle of the day,
Yeah.
or they're leaving late, or they just say, I'm gonna work on some stuff tonight. I'll just go out in the morning. And it's like, you can't approach it that way. You have to, like, for me, I have to go there and know, like, this is my routine. If I don't get sleep because I'm packing out or helping someone or cutting up, or that's one thing. But, that discipline is what separates, it separates people that notch a tag and people that take a tag home. I mean, it comes down to prep and discipline. And when I shot archery, that's what I credit. Like, I don't feel like, I tell people openly, I'm not the best archer in the world. I feel like archery is a talent of mine. I mean, it's a talent that even if I want to put it down, I'll feel guilty because I know that for whatever reason, that's something that is, I feel like I excel at. But I also know that, I put in the work to maximize where my level stops. And as long as I do that, I'm super cool with it. Like, I've never cared about the checks. There's probably checks I never even cashed. I don't really care about the trophy. To me, I like knowing my execution. I like going somewhere, having a plan. If I execute that plan, then to me, even if I didn't win the tournament, it's like I came here and made 40 good shots. Yeah, the wind got me on a few, or maybe I misjudged a couple targets, but I came here with a plan and I freaking executed it. I didn't go out at night. I wasn't eating a big ass steak at Outback, even though I wanted to have one the night before the tournament kicked off. It's like I went back, got in my room, slept, got up, did a run, hit the tournament.
Yep.
My marks were good. Like, to me, that's success. That was me finishing what my goal was and what my plan was. And I think whether you're a hunter, whether you're a guy trying to make a SEAL team, whether you're a guy going to CrossFit for your first time, or whether you're trying to grill a steak or make a good, Black Rifle Company coffee, like, make a plan and commit to it. And if you can do it 100% right, there's way more benefit to doing that than, don't give me a shitty cup of coffee.
I don't know if there's a better way for us to end this, because your wife's going to kill us if we're back too late anyway.
Oh yeah, that's perfect.
Thank you again for the time and generosity, man. It's been an awesome day and a half.
Oh, dude, it was a blast.
Can't wait to go hump that bow around the Montana backcountry.
I know.
See if I can get lucky.
I actually want to just go with you now.
Well, how about you come with me and I'll let you hold it, and I can be like, John, over there.
No, I'm not holding yours. Hold your own.
Yeah, hold your own bow. We'll ride on, man. Cool. All right, that's all I have, or I should say that's all we had for the day. Episode number 11 is going to be a solo podcast. I'm going to crank it out in the next few days. So please hit me up on social media with any questions you guys have, and I'll do a post asking for questions or topics you want me to talk about. And then the t-shirts, the Cleared Hot Podcast t-shirt. I'm not going to say that they're the best shirt in the world. I'm just going to say that they're amazing, and they may be the best shirt in the world. I'm going to have to let you guys determine that. I'm going to try to get them up. They'll be the mechanism I'm going to use to sell them will be through the clearedhotpodcast.com website. I'll add a thing up there that says store, or I'll just put it in the support the podcast, whatever it may be. Probably be the next week to 2 weeks before I'm going to be able to get that up, because elk season is right around the corner. And let's be honest, people, you have to have priorities. So I think they're a pretty awesome shirt. If you buy one of the shirts and you tag me in a photo in social media, I will give you a free subscription to iTunes, the Cleared Hot Podcast. It's got a value of $0, but it's the best I can do for you. So keep your eyes out for those things. I'll put some